Hey guys, Tidewaters here. I'd like to go back into Mount and Blade Warband yet again and talk a little bit about the factions that you'll find within the game. There are a total of 6 factions in Warband, one of which is fairly more recent. It's the Serenid Sultanate, and they're in the desert. I'll get into them in detail when I get there. To show you this, I'll load up a very new game so that you can see the general outline of the original territories, and they haven't been fighting over them and have it setting up different borders. There's a total of 6. Each has a different color. The first here is Swadia. Swadia has an original reddish-orange color. These are the approximate first borders of the Swadian area. Within this, I'll also talk about the troops that you'll oftentimes find in those factions, and very specifically what that faction's specialty is, if they have one. The Swadian specialty is most certainly their cavalry. Their cavalry is the most expensive in the game, though the most armored, and their horses are also well armored. Some people might argue that they're not the best, though it would be hard not to. It would be hard to argue that they aren't, because they're the best armored, their horses are fairly quick while well armored, and their weaponry is fairly decent. Even off of horseback, say if you're sieging a castle or a town, off of horseback they can hold their own as well. They are one of the only two factions that use crossbows, the other being their neighbor here. I'll get into that shortly. Their crossbows, being fairly powerful but hard to reload, can make them formidable, though sometimes a quick cavalry charge can overwhelm them as they're trying to reload, and then sometimes a cavalry charge can be cut down as they try to charge. And for infantry, their infantry is so-so. Their infantry wears about the same armor that the Swadian knights do, though it seems slightly under theirs. They seem to die a little more often. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or not. But their infantry is a moderate infantry. But if you're talking infantry, the next one is what you're gonna want to look at here. The Nords, the blue faction. Sorry. The blue faction here, and this is the approximate borders of it in the beginning. Their absolute specialty is infantry. In fact, their very best infantry unit, called a Nord, I believe it would be Housecarl, though it's spelled Huscarl. The Nord Housecarl is the best infantry you'll find in the game, and anyone who's ever played this game wouldn't argue that. And if they do, I want to hear their evidence, because I don't know that there is any. They're well armored, their weaponry is fairly decent, and their shields are probably some of the sturdiest and larger ones in the game. Not the largest, but certainly the sturdiest, and they do cover the body fairly well. Something that the Nords have as a disadvantage, certainly, is that they don't have any cavalry whatsoever. They only have the infantry and archer trees, and their archers aren't a whole lot to look at themselves, though they are cheaper upkeep than most of the other factions. And they're an average archer. The Vigirs, the white in this general border, are supposed to be specialized in archers, though the new Serenid Sultanate faction, gives them a run for their money, so to speak. They have cavalry, and it's fast and armored medium, but they often use scythe-like weapons that can be rather ineffective from horseback, and certainly can be rather ineffective if surrounded when they are knocked off the horse. And their infantry units use similar weapons pretty frequently, so I don't particularly like them myself, though they do have fairly powerful archers, I suppose, but not once they're in melee combat. Here is the Khergit Khanate in the purple, with these approximate borders. Their specialty is cavalry. In fact, they are so specialized in cavalry that they are the only faction to have mounted archers which can be a great help when fighting in flat areas, such as, luckily for them, their neighboring areas. Swadia, Vigir, and Serenade Sultanate are mostly flat areas. Their last unit of the main cavalry, and I suppose essentially their infantry branch, is fairly powerful, and because pretty much every unit's mounted, they are a terror to fight in plains and on the field. Though for sieging, they're weak to siege against and fairly easy to siege against and fairly easy to defend from. Serenade Sultanate, their specialty is supposed to be archers, and they do have fairly good archers. I've certainly been taken off of my horse, well, often enough to know that. They also have infantry and cavalry. Their cavalry is similar to the Vigirs in that it has medium armor, and its weaponry I certainly like more than the Vigirs. It doesn't have the long scythe-like polearm weapons. But it still didn't feel like a very powerful group to me. Their archers certainly are a big problem, though, and if you're going to siege against a castle, personally, you had better check the count of archers that are in it, because they'll be a serious problem. Their infantry is fairly lightly armored, and isn't much to go against either. This, last but not least, is the Rhotics. The Rhotics is in the green, with these approximate borders. The Rhotics are the other faction that use crossbowmen, and they have the very best crossbowmen. Not only do they seem to be better at ranged combat, their crossbowmen can hold their own in melee fight to the extent that I've actually seen 2 Rhotic crossbowmen take out a Nord Housecarl, which was kind of frightening to me. And they are the only that I can think. Yes, they're the only faction that has spearmen specifically. I'm not even sure that any of their units use swords. The spears can be extraordinarily useful against knights, which conveniently, their 3 neighbors rely fairly heavily on cavalry. And they themselves also do not have cavalry, which can be which isn't really a serious problem for them because much of their territory is in mountains and has raised areas in which their crossbowmen are extremely effective. I'll very quickly go into something else that has to do for area to area, which is the bandits. The bandits of the Rhotic and the Swadian areas here are fairly medium level or lower level. They're fairly easy to take down, and they're not a real big problem unless you find a lot of them. They're outnumbering you, and you are ill-equipped in the beginning of the game. In the Nordic area, the bandits are called Sea Raiders, and there's usually a fair amount of them, and they're well-armed. And this can be a hard area to start in if you run into them. The Vigir have Tundra Bandits, and they are a medium difficulty, plus sometimes along this area you'll run into the Sea Raiders, so that can be a serious problem. In the Karagit Khanate area, the main problem with their bandits is that essentially all of them are mounted. So in the very beginning of the game, it can be a problem to try to fight the mounted units. In the Serenade Sultanate, you have a similar problem in the Karagit Khanate area, that many of the bandits are mounted, so that can be a serious problem early on. And my favorite is the Nord, Swadians, and Rhotics, mostly because they all have a very distinct specialization. If you have some Nord Housecarls paired with some Swadian Knights and some Rhotic Crossbowmen, I don't know that you could be defeated that easily. This is all somewhat my own opinion, and you may discover something to be different when you play, though I do have some strong evidence for my own opinions. I hope this helps in some way. Thank you for watching, as always, and I hope that you enjoyed.